your time and for talking to us about the film. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about it. I think it's an extraordinary film, but also a really extraordinary adaptation of a novel that isn't necessarily that easy to adapt, arguably. For people who don't know, it's an adaptation of an Elena Ferrante novel, one of her short novels, perhaps not her best known novel. So I guess I wanted to ask you first, what was it that drew you to this novel, The Lost Daughter in particular? Particularly keeping in mind that it's maybe not the easiest novel to adapt. It's a short novel. It's a lot of it's sort of first person interior monologue, very intense emotions that it explores. So what drew you to that story particularly?
I think actually it was something about Ferrante's work in general. When I first read My Brilliant Friend and the Neapolitan novels, I read them when they were first being translated into English. And I remember, like running to the bookstore to get the third one and then, waiting for the fourth one to come out. Because I think they were doing something which we've been seeing it in all sorts of art forms lately, I think. She was being honest about something about the experience of being a woman in the world that I had never heard anyone be honest about before. I mean, to the point where I was relating to things that she was saying out loud that I didn't even know I felt until she'd written them down. And I found that experience of having, things that in some ways I look back on now and I think, like we have agreed to be silent about, real darkness, terror, anxiety, pain, as well as like real surprising ecstasy and connection.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, and particularly with regards to this book, what you said about being disturbed and comforted at the same time, the way that the book talks about motherhood and maternity. The thing that struck me about both the book and the film, actually, it's like when those kind of closed circles of women where you get those really dark truths sometimes. And I felt that reading the book, but also watching the film, which is why I think the adaptation did something incredible where it's really true to the source material, but also like totally unique somehow.
Right. I mean, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about like what the world's reaction is to something truthful. Sometimes I just think people do respond to something truthful. You say something truthful to a child, you can see their eyes kind of like, you can see them take it in. We can like discern the difference. Some people, you say something truthful to them and they fucking hate you. They'll do anything they can not to hear it. But then, like we're saying, there is a kind of comforting thing about having something you recognize said out loud. And when I was writing, sometimes I was just, I was taking things that moved me from the book, but other times I was also trying to be truthful about my own experience. And I do think there's something kind of dangerous sometimes about writing. I mean, this one I don't even think is that dangerous, but like so many people have commented to me. They said, maybe I'm weird, maybe I'm alone. But I have fallen asleep on the floor taking care of my kids. And I'm like, yeah, me too. I mean, I think that's pretty common experience. That one's not so dangerous to say out loud, but even that one, the people who mentioned it to me said, maybe I'm weird, maybe I'm alone, but that's a very tame one. Then we're talking about also like the darkest perversity, the deepest anxiety, the terror actually that is included, I think, in a normal experience of being a mother. And I think that's part of what, the film is saying, as well as the ecstasy, the deepest kind of connection, just the pain that comes along with growing, I think has been turned into like kind of, it's not, we agreed not to talk about it.
or except in really, really close circles. And I think that's some of the power of seeing these things talked about on the big screen. And some of the lines that are maybe the darkest, you kept them in the book. Like I think she says something like children are a crushing responsibility, and about being an unnatural mother. And, it doesn't shy away from that darkness.
I couldn't remember actually, because I just watched the trailer, which has that line, children are crushing responsibility. And I told them, you have to put in the line after where she says, happy birthday, because like, it's, I don't remember if that's in the book actually or not, but I love the two next to each other. You're like, yeah, children are a crushing responsibility. That's true. Like, whatever, that's true. You can love them so much. I've been a mother for 15 years. I love my children, but it's true.
As also, like life goes on. They're a crushing responsibility,
and happy birthday. It's actually a gift to you. Here's a really important gift you might want to have before you have kids. Like I like the two next to each other, or like I like the very, very heartbreaking scene of young Leda walking out next to like worm coming out of the doll's mouth. I like what happens when you put those things together.
And actually, following on from that, I wanted to ask you about the process of writing, particularly the character of Leda, who she's not easy to like, and she's not necessarily easy to keep an audience on side with for a feature film. I asked about it's a short novel turned into a feature film, so I wonder what that was like, trying to write that character and keep her as someone that an audience would be not just willing to watch, but want to keep watching for the whole film.
I tried to write the kind of script that I would like to act. What I think good scripts, or whatever, what appeals to me, is really very, very rarely being literal. I want to have what the event of the scene is, what the intention of the scene is, expressed not in the words. And I think that's true in many scenes in the film. What is the event of the scene? It's almost never what's spoken out loud. Every once in a while it is, and that's cool too, to mess around with that, or to be brave enough to say, I'm going to put it down in words here, finally, maybe. But so mostly I was trying to, I love Leda. I relate to her. I understand her. She looks like women I know, both young and old. Old, no, present day and past, but I relate to all of it. I think, even like, God, some of those things she does, which are, when she says to Ed Harris, can I finish my dinner now, Lyle? That's my Louis Coleman. I imitate always when I've seen in my cut. I've seen it so many times. I like have the rhythm now of all my actors in my head. But, and then you see over her face, she just is like, why am I such an asshole? Like, I wish I hadn't said that. I have certainly had experiences like that. Why does she say she won't move down the beach? Well, in some ways she's right. And in other ways she's not. And I relate, I understand. I could be Callie, I could be her, And so I guess I just at every turn tried to make space for humanity and honesty to be able to breathe and live through the story. I did not worry about whether people liked her or not. I don't believe in that. I don't. I think we can put fantasies of ourselves and who we'd like to be on screen, or we can put ourselves honestly on screen with like vulnerability and heart. And I love Leda. And if I love Leda, and if Olivia loves Leda, and Jessie loves Leda, which they're brilliant actresses, and the only way to act someone is to love them. That's like square one. Then it's up to the audience if they want to love her with us or not,
Yeah. And did you write Leda with either of those actresses in mind? Or did they come after?
No, it's funny. I wrote her almost, like just imaginary person. I kind of wrote Professor Hardy with my husband in mind.
Okay.
And then weirdly, I didn't know Dagmara Dominčík, who played Callie, very well. I had her in my mind. I didn't even know her very well. I acted with her briefly on The Deuce and thought she was really incredible. And somehow she just came into my mind. I can tell you how I ended up with Olivia, or why I wanted her. I knew, and Ferrante, actually, it's interesting. I have had a few interactions with Ferrante, all of them via email, but I knew, and then it's interesting because Ferrante, she gave me 3 notes when she read the script, and all of them were really helpful and really great. One of them was something I already knew, but it was so nice to hear this kind of major thing reflected back to me by this person who I admired so much. She said, Leda can't be crazy. She can't be mad. If she's crazy, she didn't say why, but I think if she's crazy, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about this actually, that have developed even as I've thought about it. But if she's crazy, why make the movie? I mean, then you're like, oh, look at this crazy woman and these awful things she's doing, and I'm such a good mama, I'm so glad I'm nothing like her. When in fact, the intention is the opposite, which is to say, can we create an exciting enough, compelling enough, loving enough, honest enough environment where in fact the audience will feel brave enough to consider the ways, and empathetic enough to consider the ways in which they are like Leda, even if we're not going to walk out on our kids, Also, I think there's this tradition of like brilliant actresses, brilliant, beautiful actresses playing crazy people in movies, and people are really compelled by it. It's like porn kind of. But I mean, amazing actresses in amazing movies, but that was just not what I wanted to do. Anyway, so I knew I needed like a fundamentally sane actress, not just sane, but somebody with like a very strong mind.
Right.
Then I also thought the movie is pretty dark and asks you to do some work, and Leda, like we're talking about, she can be very tough. And so I wanted an actress who was funny and had levity and warmth, that you just couldn't squeeze out of her even if you wanted to. And then lastly, I also think that there are some really brilliant actresses who are kind of brittle, who have a kind of coldness about them, no blood in their veins. And Olivia is the opposite of that. She's just so human. So then I was like, it should be her. It should be Olivia Colman. And she was so different than the imaginary woman I had written. But I love that difference too.
And you have to have, I think, a lot of confidence in your visual language, though, to build something like that. To say, we're gonna give you 2 different women. I'm not gonna give you any visual cues necessarily that they're the same person, and you're just gonna go with it. You have to have a lot of confidence, I think, in the way you're shooting. So I wanted to ask you about that, because the visual language to me is extremely precise. It's beautiful. And it felt, when I started watching the film, it felt like it was maybe going to be a thriller. And it sort of starts taking the thriller apart and becoming something totally different. So I wanted to ask you about that process, those decisions.
Yeah, I guess I think the simplest way to consider it is like, I kind of hung my hat on the thriller form. I kind of wanted to, which is not so much in the book. The book isn't really a thriller. It's maybe a little, but just because there's that danger coming from the family on the beach, that's important to the book. But I definitely heightened that in the movie. So yeah, I wanted to use like a classic, like Italian neorealist, or like a classic kind of thriller, language. Also, well, yes, and then let it explode into something new. And I think I wasn't sure when I started exactly what that explosion would look like. Maybe explode into something that's me, that's my language. It's funny, as I think about it now, I think, I was on the jury at Cannes this year. And so 3 weeks after I finished my final mix, I went and watched 24 movies, excellent movies from around the world. And when I was watching the movies, I was thinking, you can do whatever you want. You can make up your own language if it's rooted in something honest.
Right.
And I think there was a part of me when I started that just a little bit of me that didn't totally trust that, and that thought, I'm gonna use this known, reliable language and then bring myself out of it. And I love it. I do. But I'm just sort of curious what's going to happen next time, where I think I probably will just use only my language. But what I was thinking then was like, we're going to get everyone comfortable. We're going to, rely on, we're over her shoulder. She's like through her sunglasses. She's looking across the beach. We're on a long lens. What does that mean? We're in her head, I'm going to also use another thing I was really playing with and interested in was like the kind of way that we adore women, like the best way that we adore and objectify women on screen. Like I think about like Antonioni and Monica Vitti, or all the incredible Godard women where you're like, I want to eat them. I want to wear their sweater. I want to be them, whatever it is. It's still an objectification, right? There's still only like a small piece of that woman that's being expressed. So I was using all that kind of language with Dakota in the beginning. And then Dakota walks into that scene where she finally talks to Olivia and says, thanks her for finding her daughter. And all of a sudden this fantasy, gorgeous, compelling, sexy, woman who's been a sort of magnet for us all speaks. And she's like really needs things, and her desire and her hunger and her like not being satisfied is so palpable. I loved that. Like then she just cracks through the genre into something else. And then the visual language, like around those basic building blocks, was really from me and Helene Louvart, who was my brilliant cinematographer, from our unconscious minds. We were like, that doesn't work. I never used a 50, like maybe the whole movie. I was like, that's not this movie. This movie isn't, it just never felt right. You're deeper inside someone, or you're further out. You're never just like this, Hi, I'm Maggie Gyllenhaal, the writer and director of The Lost Daughter. And I wish so much that I were there to do this in person. I've heard amazing things about this film festival. I keep hearing about how great it is. I hope I can come another time. But I'm so pleased that you'll get to be there and see the film in a theater as it was conceived. Yeah, thank you for coming.